Welcome to the Total
Uh,
German Shepherd Dog podcast. I'm your host, Abhai Kaul, and today we're unpacking a topic that's often misunderstood, even by people who've been around working dogs for a few years: energy versus drive. Well, let's start by unpacking that they're not the same thing. A dog that bounces off the walls isn't necessarily a dog that wants to work, and a dog that looks calm on the surface might be carrying more drive than meets the eye. Knowing the difference and breeding the right balance can make or break a working dog's success. And to help me break it all down, I'm joined by Mr. Ajay Singh, a respected breeder of working line German Shepherd dogs from the kennel from Patiala, whose dogs aren't just energetic, they're driven, focused, and purpose built for real work. AJ is known for producing dogs with strong character and clear heads, and today we're digging into how he does that. We'll talk about what drive really means, how to spot it in a puppy, and what buyers, trainers, and even breeders often get wrong. And whether you're a first time handler or a seasoned competitor, this episode will start it. How you doing, sir?
Good. How are you?
I'm
How
doing
are
really
you?
well.
Yeah. No. The topic came up because I got a phone call from a potential puppy buyer. Very well educated person. I think she's doctor. I don't know whether she's a doctor through PhD or she's a medical doctor. I don't know, but definitely a doctor. Attached with her name. And she asked me for a. She says I want a working line dog with low drive because I'm not gonna do anything, no IGP sport with the dog. But the only thing I want is maybe nose work. Okay, so I'm not gonna go into why nose work, whatever people choose to do with their dog, it's their call. But the thing that really, you know, and this is not the first time I've heard about people because some people actually go on the internet saying that their dogs are low drive dogs just to sell the puppies because they have really found that it's a good selling point because there are a lot of people who are looking for a certain color or a certain you know trait in a dog or appearance or whatever or working dog show dog, but they want a dog that they can live with, and and there some of them have a very, you know, this person herself was not as inactive, but some people are really inactive and they want the dog to fit into their lifestyle. So I thought it would be a good topic of discussion. That's why I brought it to your attention, and
Sure.
I'm glad we are discussing it, and hopefully, through our discussion, we may be able to help some people, um,
Yeah, absolutely.
understand this, and that's the whole intent of, doing the video.
So let's talk about definitions and misconceptions first. So, what is drive in a working dog context for you?
What drive, whether it's a working dog or working person or whatever, you know, drive is a desire to achieve a certain goal, you know, and most of the time it's intrinsic in the dogs more so than even human beings. Okay, because I normally say 80-90% of what you see in a dog is genetically programmed to be there. Okay, so
Yes.
I try to address these things, through proper selection of, breeding dogs.
Sure.
um just one thing to keep in mind, that sometimes even when the breeders have the best interest and they want to produce the best dogs and all that stuff, nature takes over. So
Yeah.
sometimes we see a dog only for a short time, so sometimes we don't read the dogs correctly. So a lot of good breeders are smart, intelligent people who know how to read dogs, okay? And they would look for certain things in a dog, and not necessarily the score books, because people who just go by high scoring dog to high scoring dog sometimes miss a lot of things, because I think more than the score is what you have to see is how the score was made. Okay.
Yeah. Oh,
So,
absolutely. Yes.
okay. Then the next thing is, some people say, well,
Speaks more of the trainer than the dog, always, in my opinion.
yeah, and was a lot of is how is the drive, channeled, okay?
Yeah.
And actually that leads to another way of, the point I wanted to make is it's not the drive, it's drive without conflict, because
Yes.
sometimes the dog has a lot of desire on its own and wants to work for himself and all this stuff. But the moment you ask the dog to do something for you, okay,
Yeah.
all of a sudden the conflict comes in the way. And
Sure.
the dog doesn't want to perform for you and has
Right.
not learned, if I do this, I get what I want, whether it's food, ball, whatever, that desire is for the dog, okay? Um,
Right.
but so I think it's the best training dogs are the ones who who have a very open mind towards learning, and they retain things, and they're not as impulsive. When they're very impulsive, that means they have a preconceived idea that they're going to do something, and the moment you ask them, to do something different than what they had in mind, all of a sudden they put the mental block. Okay, so they're
Sure.
not, yeah, they're not easy to train, because if you have a ball and you say, you do this for me, I give you the ball, or if you do this for me, I'll give you the food. But it takes them a long time to understand that this leads to the food, okay? Because all they can think of is food, 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 ball, 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 and they cannot look at the ball and process the command at the same time. So
The
they're very,
eureka moment doesn't hit him.
yeah, for so they're so impulsive. Yes, they hit the sleeve hard because they only see the sleeve, but
Yeah.
they don't see the person behind the sleeve.
Right.
Okay. So the next question people would say is, when someone says, I want to build drive, okay, how do you build drive? Okay. And the building of the drive is based on a simple principle, which is, um, success builds drive. If you're doing
Yes.
something, yeah,
Successful
and
repetitions.
yeah, it, and if you're doing something, I mean, look at ourselves. Okay, how do we get better? How do we learn? Is increasing level of difficulty, and a chance of being successful. If we can be successful, at every level, and there's increasing level of difficulty, not all the time, but episodal, just like we take tests and things like that, then it
Yeah.
leads us to believe that we can do more than what we could do when we started. Okay,
Right.
so I think so. Eventually, success builds drive, but
Sure.
how to be successful with increasing level of difficulty, and I think a lot of times, if the dog takes the direction from the handler, and the handler teaches the dog to be successful, so the teamwork leads to even more drive in these dogs. Okay,
Sure.
because now they have become more successful, through the teamwork,
Right.
and I think those dogs always turn out to be good working dogs, in my opinion. Okay, uh,
So
and
we've
and
discussed the. Go ahead.
and they're not very difficult to live with. You
Right.
know, now I think, let me finish this thought, then we'll discuss it. The next thing is, what do we commonly see? What do people call drive? What people sometimes call drive is not drive, it's just hectic energy, unfocused energy
Yeah.
in the dog. And these dogs are jumping all over. It takes you 5, 10 minutes before they even know what their name is, or start registering, hey, I'm talking about you, or pay
Yeah.
attention to what I'm saying. And by that time, some people give up and they say, no, I cannot deal with this dog because he has
Yeah.
too much. But it's not the drive, it's the hecticness. And I think people have to understand that hecticness is an undesirable, quality in a dog. And to give you an example, I think I lost you. Oh,
No, no, I'm
give
here.
you
We
an
just had a power outage.
it's like having a dog, who you start training and he makes mistakes, 6, 7 times, then he's too tired, you know, and then seventh time when he's working at half the energy and
Yeah.
doesn't have has already satisfied his desire, then that dog starts performing. But when you go to the trial, you never get the 6, 7 chances, and those dogs become very difficult to train. They look great in practice, especially selective practice, you know, but but in reality, go to a real trial, they don't perform so well. So I
Yes.
think a
Yes.
impulse or a control over impulse is a big part of
Right.
what
And let's
for
talk
if
about the dangers of confusing one for the other when we're selecting a puppy.
well, I personally, I don't do any testing on the puppies. I don't know. I think some people may think
Sure.
that, may do some testing of the puppies. I also don't let the puppies bite me, you know, whether it's my pants, my shoes, blah, blah, blah. They can bite me, but I don't encourage it, and as a result, you'll see some of my puppies would be, with my grandson or someone else, and they are sitting there and they're not, biting that whoever it is, whether it's me or him or anybody else. Yes, of course, sometimes when they get excited, they may chase someone, they may try to grab someone because that's the intrinsic behavior of the dog. Okay, but I don't typically encourage too much of biting, and I never had a dog who didn't want to bite when they were older. So I don't think that letting a dog, put holes in your arm and your clothes or whatever, you know, really leads to a better working dog. I think it's a misconception, So that's my way of, raising puppies, but other people do it differently. I don't have any issue with how they do it. I just do it this way. So.
So let's talk about, since we're on the subject, let's talk about genetics and early development. So how do breeders like yourself or any number of other breeders, the typical working line breeders, let's say, select for specific drives, whether it's prey drive, whether it's food drive, or whether it's hunt drive? You just said, because you innately know your bloodlines and you're, familiar with the dogs that you're breeding with, how they are, and then you can kind of predict in an educated fashion how the puppies might turn out. But when you're going overseas or you buy a female that you're breeding for the first time, and you go overseas to breed to a male that you perhaps don't have that much access prior to, that you've not seen him so much, what would you look in those puppies, whether it's prey, food, or hunt drive? What would be the things that would lend you to select a puppy from that particular litter?
Well, I haven't bought a puppy in a long time. I've kept puppies from my own breedings. I think you've done the same thing too. Okay. Most of the time,
Yes, yes,
we address it, through the parents, And
Yeah, I have a
then,
hard time answering that question too because
yeah,
but
we
let's say you have Fizza, you just bought this female Fizza from Europe, and you bring her over to a male pregnant, just for instance. How would you, because you have no prior knowledge of that female, nor do you have prior knowledge of her family intimately, nor do you have prior knowledge of the stud dog that you might be breeding to in Germany when you bring her over. How would you select a puppy from that litter?
I'm not as wise as some people may think I am, because
We'll keep that a secret.
yeah, it's sometimes I do impulsive, things too. Okay, so this
Sure,
was an impulsive buy for me because I had followed her mother for some time, and I liked
sure.
what her mother was. And when she was bred to another good dog. The first time she was bred to Gero, and the second time she was bred to Einstein. I like both of these dogs. So when I talked to the breeder, and so I picked her as a puppy, of course, with his help too. I always, you know, number one, I pick a breeder that, you know, has my interest in mind and also wants to send me a good puppy. Number two, one who listens to me, who has experience training dogs, raising dogs, breeding dogs. Um, and sometimes I'm hesitant to buy a dog from a breeder who has not trained any dog himself, or you look for the type of dog the breeder likes himself, and then you know if you agree with his style of you know his liking or disliking of the dog, then those turn out to be better breeders for you. Um, the How do you pick a puppy? I mean, multiple factors, of course. When you look for a dog, but I think I would start with the breeder, and then start with the genetics, of the puppy, and then from that point on, more than anything else, listen to the breeder, let him know what I'm looking for, what type of dogs you like, what type of dogs you don't like, and let them help you pick a dog for you. Okay. So that's my way of selecting, a puppy. But a lot of that is I put more faith into the parents and the breeding and the breeder than 10 minutes of me looking at a dog, or even 15, 10 minutes, 10 times, because some people like to go and keep on, visiting the dogs and all the stuff. Okay. I'm not
Yeah.
much, I'm not much into it. Okay. I think sometimes it's better to rely on the breeder than your own wisdom. Okay. Because once you start, doing all the work, once you start saying, I'm gonna go check the puppies every third day. I'm gonna go check the puppy. Then the breeder becomes like, they start taking less interest in you, because then they say, you'll pick your own puppy. I'm not responsible for it. And if something goes right or wrong, whatever, then the breeder says,
That's your
you,
problem.
it's your problem. You picked this puppy. You didn't listen to me at that time.
Right.
So that's my way of doing it, is trust a breeder. Um, you don't buy any dog from someone that you don't trust. Okay. Um, Even if it comes from great breedings or whatever, but go to a breeder that you can trust. And once you trust a certain person, then don't trust them only with the lip service. Trust him all
Right.
the way. Trust him to find a good dog for you. Take the puppy that he wants to give you. I think your chances are much better if you go that route, than any other way.
So let's go with this then. Does energy levels correlate with bloodlines or any reliable form of temperament testing? So you're looking for we're calling it hectic, and then you have, active obedience, that the puppies are pushy, pushy, pushy. Like they're always like coming to you and pushing you instead of being quiet and sitting and looking at you. So do these and that puppy obviously has really high energy levels, but then do these energy levels correlate with bloodlines, and does temperament testing help in determining that or not?
Well,
And
I
let's
mean,
how does energy and drive manifest in puppies?
you always, I don't do much of a drive testing in the puppies, okay? But what I do is I take a puppy that picks me, okay? A puppy that keeps coming back to me, even if I push it away, it still comes back to me. Even, what I want to see is a little bit of resilience, a little bit of that, hey, I want to be, with you. I want to do something for you, okay? And these are not always the most active puppies because energy level changes with age. Just
Also,
because,
I want to make a sidebar here and just mention that it could also be a very submissive puppy that wants to come and seek your approval. So we might want to differentiate between that.
yeah, but the submissive puppy, if you push them away, they don't come back
Right.
to you.
Right, of course, yes.
Okay. So that's how you kind of can tell that, hey, this puppy is not hectic, is not submissive, is just a stable pup who just wants to stand next to me and look at me,
Yep.
or, if I'm doing something in the yard, he wants to be right by my side. It's a puppy that, would rather be with you than with the pack,
Right.
and, you know, and, and I think the drive level also changes with obviously, like I described before, success builds drive. The other is
Right.
not going to breed dogs who don't have any drive. We are both lucky because, we are on third, fourth generation dogs from our own kennels, so we have a good idea, what drive level would be in the dogs. But
Yes, sir.
I want to see the drive in a dog because drive is a very useful thing. It's the focus. It allows the dog to you can train a dog much easier if he has a drive. If the dog has no drives, like some people say, I want a low drive dog. How do you
Right.
train a drive dog? I mean,
Compulsion? Your
yeah,
options are limited to compulsion then.
yeah, I mean, your options go down significantly,
Yes.
and and I don't think I personally, if people when people like that come to me and want the low drive dog, I describe them what I have, and if they get stuck on I want a low drive dog, I always say you have other choices. My dogs are not going to be like that. Now, just because someone wants me to breed a dog their way, it kind of insults my
Right.
intelligence because we have devoted our whole life, learning about what the breed is all about. And now someone comes over and he says, I want a black and silver dog, all you want to do is say, go shove it. Okay. When you learn as much as I do, or when you spend as many years as I have spent learning about the breed, then I'll start listening to you. But up until then, it's your turn to listen. Yeah. So,
So let's highlight this with an example. Let's take Buddy. How was Buddy as a puppy? That's your current dog that you're training and competing with. How was Buddy as a puppy, and how has he turned out so far?
well, you were a part of the journey because I made a, made a post today, saying that, this dog connects to my soul. Okay.
Yeah.
And and he really does. Okay, because he I think the first thing was I didn't want to keep another male, at
Yeah.
home. And then I had these puppies where Buddy was very much like the Yukon type, okay? And
Right.
he was Yukon type in character and he was Yukon type in,
Can we highlight what the Yukon type was?
well, I mean, it's Yukon type was not a hectic type. He always wanted to be with me, He had the appearance like Yukon, but good bone, good head, good, dark pigmentation, which I like. Doesn't mean other people have to like the same thing I like. And
I mean,
also,
it's you have to live with the dog. You better like it, right?
yeah, a very stable, tight feet, athletic, very firmness is a big deal for me. Okay.
Yeah.
And the harmony in the whole body. It was not one portion of the body was out of proportion. It just kind of
Right.
everything fitted together.
Right.
And to me, that was the attractive part, about Buddy. There were a couple of puppies in that breeding which had even more drive than Buddy. Okay.
Sure.
But for me, Buddy was the right dog for me. And
Right.
it has turned out to be like that. And I'm not saying I don't like drive or I like drive or whatever, but I'm just saying that if there's a dog that I want to work with, then I can find ways to train that dog. Okay.
Yes. And then,
And
as you mentioned earlier, we want to highlight again a dog with drive doesn't necessarily mean a dog that can't settle in the house and be a part of the household. That should be an obligation that the dog should be able to do that, like the on off switch that we talk about.
the what appeals to me about him is he's he's very easy to train. He learns very
Hmm.
quickly and he retains things, very well. And
Right.
when I even correct him, whether it's physical or whatever I do, one you'll never see the ears kind of go down, you know,
Right.
and it's almost like there's hardly ever any conflict, with him. It's almost like, no, I'll continue to work with you, and
Right.
and and if even if I get to a point where I'm not getting anywhere with him, somehow there's a lack of communication between us. Next time I would bring him back, I would change a couple of things, and he would have a different perspective. And it just seems like the training goes so much, quicker, easier. Okay. And
Sure.
the other thing is, it's not bubbly. It's like, yes, he's not totally stoic, but he's not stupid either, where he's, you know, all over the place, where it takes me a long time to even, collect his head and, say, hey, okay,
Sure.
yeah, do this for me. He,
Right.
uh, he comes out with an attitude that he wants to learn.
Right.
Okay. And he pays attention to what we are doing, and that's what makes it so much easier because there's no conflict in the
Right.
learning. Yeah,
Right.
he's more open-minded that way, and physically he's very gifted. Even though he's a bigger dog, he
Right.
jumps well, he moves well, and he has a balance of the body structure that helps him. um, but I think more than another example I would give him,
Right.
because sometimes it's easier for. I mean, I'm hesitant to praise my own dog and say, "Oh yeah, my dog is the best." Blah blah blah. My dog is. I like him very much. Doesn't mean that he is universally the best dog. I mean,
No, I
some.
mean, I would appreciate your opinion of on your dog because you live with that dog and you would have the most complete opinion of that dog.
Yeah, I mean, I give you an example. I bred to Lex. You know,
Sure.
horn
The most recent breeding.
most recent breeding, right?
Yes.
And
Let's give a little introduction, like a brief introduction about the dog.
Lex Hornhute is a KNPV dog with a PH1, I think with 425 score or something.
Sure.
Has good hips, good elbows, is DM clear, back is good, uh, nice dog. He just came, Chip bought the dog recently, about a year ago or something, and brought him over here. and I had a chance to meet him and look at his pedigree. When he brought the dog over, the thing I liked about the dog is that he was very normal in any environment. Like nothing bothered him. He was not like
Yeah.
his pupils were not dilated when he stepped out of his truck. Okay, he walked
Right.
normally. He made eye contact. He didn't. There was no anxiousness about him. There was no heavy breathing. He was very
Yeah.
calm, very stable. Um,
Yeah.
he approached everyone the same way. He was good with kids. He was good with other dogs, other animals. And some people say, because you and I are both from India, and we see people, who always encourage, they want the dog to be dog aggressive, oh, he beat so and so's dog, blah, blah, blah. And it's kind of talked about like, oh, it's such a desirable trait because I have a dominant dog or blah. Okay.
That's not dominance.
Yeah, that's not dominance to begin
No.
with. Number two, if the dogs are herding sheep or something, they work in a pack. Okay. If they're more concerned about each other than the task on hand, then the farmer would only be, or the shepherd would only be concerned about, hey, are they going to get into a fight with each other, as
Right.
opposed to
Right.
do the work. Okay.
Yes.
So you don't, this thing was especially for the pack animals, who work as a group, to
Yes.
accomplish a task, you know, being neutral towards other dogs is a very desirable trait, so
Yes.
in fact, it's an essential trait, not
Absolutely.
a desire.
Absolutely.
Trait. Yeah. So that's one reason why.
Especially if it has to be a sport dog.
Yes, and that was another reason why I like Lex, very much. His bite work and everything. Any dog that has done KNPV with a high score, you know that the dog is going to have speed, the dog's going to have grips, the dog is going to have good fighting drive, and all that stuff. So that's a given. I mean, that was not so much of a concern. I just played with him, with the ball. And when he bit the ball, you know, I could feel the grip, on the
Yeah.
ball. And if
Right.
the grip is there on the ball, the grip is going to be there on the sleeve. And
Yes.
if 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 there was no issue with the temperament working with different people, different, that tells me the dog. And the other thing is the on-off switch. He could be very high
Yeah.
drive, yet he could
Yeah.
control his impulse. He was not like, once you get him going, then it was hard to stop him.
Right.
You could stop him, you could bring him back up again, drive, you could stop him, and he would listen. And and then the dog like retrieve over the 1 meter hurdle. The what that exercise is not there as a part of the KNPV exercise. Okay.
Sure.
And even in the police work that he had done, the police work, what do you do? The dog jumps through the window. The handler tells him to down once he jumps on the other side because he has to jump through the window
Yeah.
himself and then tells the dog to go. Okay.
Yes.
That's a very real life exercise because if the dog jumps through the window and keeps going by the time the handler jumps through the window, you know,
Dog's gone already.
dog's way gone.
Yeah.
So so then he says, let me try teaching him the dumbbell retrieve. So within a 15-minute session, we talked. The dog picked up the object, dumbbell off the ground, brought it back, then learned to jump and bring the dumbbell over the jump, you know, in 15 minutes. And that to me showed me that the dog had a very open mind towards learning.
Sure.
And to me,
Pronounced drives and pliability.
yeah, yeah. So
Yes.
those things are. like they were very high on my list, along with the health, the appearance, and all that stuff.
Sure.
And you've seen my dogs. My dogs sometimes tend to be a little flat in the withers. Okay.
Sure.
Uh, so this dog, was higher in the withers. So that's the other reason why I felt that he would give me something that, I'm looking for. And he has a very good lay and length of the croup, which is
Yeah.
another thing that I'm missing in some of my dogs.
Right.
Yeah. So
So
that,
let's talk about managing energy dogs versus low drive and a high drive with medium energy.
I mean, I think the managing dogs who have a better impulse control, it's so much easier because once you get them into a certain routine, right? When you say we go for a walk in the morning, or we do training in the morning, or, you know, it has to be one way or another way, right? Then the dogs kind of follow that routine very much. Okay. Whereas if there's a hectic dog, then it's hard to teach the dog the routine. Okay. Because all they want to do is, just jump on you, just jump on the sofas, run all over the place, run through the house with the muddy feet or whatever, you know, that kind of stuff. It's like,
That sounds close to home.
yeah, it's the unfocused energy,
Yes.
unfocused energy. Of course, you have to work with the puppies. It's not going to be like day one. The puppy
Yes.
comes out, knows exactly what to do. But I
Yes.
think once the dogs know the routines and things like that, the dogs with good focus and good impulse control, they tend to do better. They are
And what, yeah.
easier
And
to.
what's the role of handlers channeling drive appropriately and the consequences of mistaking one for the other as far as developing your puppies?
I I don't do much of a drive work early on, with the
Sure.
I may do some, you know, but I don't start, heavy duty training like some people do. I'm teaching, muscle movement. I'm teaching the dog to go to the left or to go to the right, or, I may start with something as simple as, sit, or I may start, when they look at me, I may start, rewarding them for that. Or when they
Yeah.
come to me, I start rewarding for that. So I start rewarding for the behavior which is desirable to me without adding any command or anything. Okay.
Yeah. Just the mechanics.
Just you perform, you give me this behavior. This is the behavior I like today. This is the behavior I'm gonna like tomorrow. This is the behavior I'm gonna like when you're 10 years old. Okay. So
Right.
those are the first things, that I start working on. And then everything else, I don't do any healing up until the dog on his own starts looking at me,
Right.
and then
Offering
once,
the behavior to you
yeah,
naturally.
yeah, yeah. Then when the dog does all the, I'm walking, the dog comes to me. I mean, I don't do any I mean, I start taking the dog for a walk, and
Yes.
I'm lucky because I live near the park. If I go there early enough, I can let him run, with the other dogs. And then there comes a point where the dog leaves the other dogs and starts coming back to you. When
Right.
the dog starts coming back to me, that's when I start rewarding him, because now he's offering the behavior which is desirable
Yes.
to me, rather
Yes.
than saying my dog doesn't come to me, blah, 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 and so I reward a dog who comes to me on his own as opposed to start doing the recalls and all that stuff. So my initial thing is walk with the dog. And a lot of times I walk with young dogs, puppies, without any line. I actually
Right.
I put the line on when the dog learns to stay with me. That's when I would add the line to the dog, not the other way around.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't
So,
teach the dog
uh-huh.
to come to me because I jerked on the line or I showed him the food or something.
Right.
I want him to
Right.
come to me because that's a pleasant place to go. Yeah.
Absolutely. So going
So,
from that, let's talk about practical tips for buyers and new handlers. So what should a new buyer or a person look for in a breeder when they're selecting, as we touched on in the beginning, or a puppy that they're looking to select for working?
well, honest breeder is one who, who's not selling you exactly what you go and ask for, Like, I know a breeder who says, when people come over and look at a stable puppy and say, I want a black and tan, you don't tell them that this puppy will become black and tan, Yeah. and
No,
yeah, and when the puppy doesn't become black and tan, you put it on him and or her, and say you didn't do something you were supposed to do, and that kind
you
of
didn't paint him right.
yeah, yeah. So to begin with, just honest, describe to them what you have done, uh,
Right.
breeding, what the goal behind, the breeding was, what are
Right.
you looking for, what type of dogs do you breed, what type of dogs do you like,
Right.
and you may not sell puppies to everyone, and that should never be
Nor
the
should you.
uh
Nor should you. I said, nor
yeah,
should you be looking to sell puppies to everyone. Not everyone
no,
deserves a puppy.
no, that's never the goal. The
Right.
goal is, the right people will come, for
Right.
the and I'm gonna breed dogs the type I like, okay,
Yes.
and not what the market wants.
Right.
Okay, so I never bred for the market. I try to be consistent with what the breed. It's easy for me to pick a dog for breeding because I'm not worried about what anyone else wants. I'm more, I like the dog. I'm gonna breed to the dog. Simple.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then can we highlight the importance of environment stimulation and realistic expectations of a puppy or from a puppy, I should say?
Well, I mean, realistic expectation. I, and some people come over and some people are more diligent than I am. They would, you know, train the puppies. They would do great training of the puppies. I have heard some people say, "Oh, we put the music on." I've heard people say, "Oh, we touch the toes. We do this at this date and blah blah blah." If I have done it, it's by accident, okay? But
Oh, there's actually studies that show that all that is horse crap. None of that actually means anything.
yeah, but there are as many studies that say it's a horse crap as, and then there are others that say, oh, you benefit from that. I I think it's bull crap, in my opinion. I think
Yeah.
if the parents are good, and some people go out of their way to socialize the dogs. I'm not
Right.
saying that the dog should
But
never.
also we should highlight that you can't lock a dog away in a basement and expect it to
No,
be
no,
100%.
absolutely. You still have to
Yeah.
treat the dog. You still have to walk the dog. You still have to let the dog see other dogs, other
It
people.
has to be able to see the world that it has to live in.
Absolutely. But
Yeah.
we also have seen dogs people get from the pounds, and
Yes.
you know, who have huge drawbacks in their, temperament, you know, and they will blame everything on, oh, the dog was never socialized. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The dog who's abused is a good one.
Yeah. Coming back to to what I've said before, you know,
Right.
80% of the dog is pre-programmed,
Yeah.
when you have 20% to work with. Yeah.
And
If
so then what do you say is the role of the breeder in educating the potential buyers?
I think the role of the breeder first is to educate himself, herself. That should never be underestimated, the role of that. I think it's so important that the breeder has a intrinsic desire to learn about the breed. If the breeder doesn't have a desire to learn about the breed, does not love the breed, doesn't like what they are doing, doesn't eat, live, and breathe dogs, okay, of that type, you know, because it takes a long time to learn about the breed. I mean, I'm getting
Yeah.
older now,
It's a lifelong
and
pursuit. It really
yeah,
is.
and then you say, I learned certain things about, but now I'm getting too old, so I may have to stop soon,
Right.
because,
Nah, you got time.
yeah, I can't keep going. Okay.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing is the mentorship, and people say, well, mentorship is, talking to someone, once or twice. No, multiple times, different topics. Go
Yeah.
walk the
Bug
dog,
them as much as you can.
live with them if you can.
Right.
Go, walk the dogs with them, train with them, as many times because,
Yeah. Clean after the dog. Clean the kennels.
yeah, sometimes the breeder would, you never know when the breeder wants to share something with you. Your mentor may want to share something with you.
Yes.
They may see something and they say, look at this. You see the back over there?
Yeah.
That's not what we are looking for. Or
Right.
did you see how the back changed with time? Okay.
Yes.
Did you see that underline of this dog change with time? You
Yeah.
know, and did you see the
Or
jumping?
dry development.
Yes, different things, right? And you can only share that knowledge when you see something in front of you, and then you
Yes.
can say, You saw this dog 6 months ago. Look at this dog now. You know what I'm talking about, right?"
Yes. Yeah. Oh,
And
absolutely.
and this is how you learn about the breed. You don't learn about the breed, through videos. You don't learn about the breed,
No.
by
You can
watching.
yeah.
Yeah,
Books,
yeah,
reading comments, whatever it might be.
yeah,
It's a
yeah.
lived experience. It's a lived everyday experience.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
I had a great opportunity to spend some time over with Horst and Mika. I stayed at their house. I walked the dogs with them. I went over to their club. Went then had a chance to visit other people, but these Horst and Mika were the ones that I really wanted to be like. They were my
Yes.
people that I wanted to copy because I had seen
Model
what
yourself after.
modeled myself after. Okay, because they were excellent breeders who worked their own dogs, and their dogs had good health, good working ability, good structure. They showed their dogs at the Seeger show. They showed their dogs at the BSP. This is pretty much how I was introduced to the breed. Was lucky enough to have a dog like Arik, and then he was a good
That
looking,
you
good.
went to the world championship with yourself.
Well, those things become milestones, but you look back at that and you look, I mean, are they
Just for
big deal?
context, I just want to add that as a apostrophe just for
It's
context.
like you have bred multiple VA dogs, okay? You remember, the events and all that stuff, right? You remember their strengths and weaknesses. You
Yes.
remember how you trained them, you know.
Yep.
But then you live in the present. Your
Absolutely.
day-to-day life. You don't walk around. I bred five VA dogs, okay, blah blah blah,
No.
okay, or more,
No.
whatever the number.
No. No, I
You
don't
know,
like to talk
I
about
mean,
that.
exactly. You live
Yeah.
your day-to-day life, which is, do I enjoy the dog that I have? Yes.
Yes.
If the answer is yes, then everything is
At
does.
this point, I'd say the VA title is to me is meaningless. The dogs are more important than the
Well,
titles.
I would say the same thing about some of the dogs competing at the high level too.
Yes.
And sport to me, if it has no connection to the breed, is
Right.
meaning is
Yes.
meaningless.
Yes.
Yeah, you want to play the sport, go, compete in the sport, do whatever you want to do. It's more or less, testing your training skills. Okay. But
Right. Right.
my connection with the with the sport was, as it relates to the breed. And it still is the same thing.
Yeah.
It
Right.
allows me to peep into the dog's makeup and
Yeah. Yeah.
decide whether it's breeding type dog for me or not. And
Sure.
that's the way I look at it. I am not into,
So let me ask you when you say that. Let me ask you, what's been your most favorite dog that you ever bred to?
the dog that comes very close to what I would call an ideal dog for me was Mac.
Mac Fondekine.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean
And why
that's
is
the
that? Why is that?
because everything that we had, the one, he was not a dog that was made up. Okay. I
Yes.
mean, the thing, he was so pure, so natural at
I know
everything.
exactly what you mean.
Yeah. It's not
Having
like,
experienced that dog, but I want to, I want you to, in your words, tell the audience what you mean. But I know exactly what you mean, having met him.
yeah, he was himself all the time. Okay. And and his himself part was so strong, so dominant, so it was almost like he knew who he was. That's the thing, and that's how he carried himself because
He
he
had an
all
air about him.
yeah, he always looked down upon other dogs. Okay. He would say, okay, now I go in the house. None of you guys should come near the door. Okay. Go outside. You're outside dwellers. I'm the one who gets to sleep in the room. Okay. So, I mean, everything about that dog was almost like, he put up with the family, but and he did things with them, but
Right.
he never felt that he was below anyone. The only
Right.
person he listened to was me, and
Right.
but he loved everybody. He loved
Ah!
not everybody, the family
Right.
member. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, not everybody.
That's the
Everybody.
caveat. That's the caveat.
Yeah.
Do you want to share the UPS guy story?
No, UPS guy came over, but he had just got home, and she opened up he was in the back, so she pressed the button, he came out, and the UPS guy was walking across the street. Okay. He jumped,
Right.
he ran towards him before Bunty could get out of the car, right? UPS guy was, on top of his car, and he was circling him, so.
Right.
So no, there were multiple things like that.
Right.
But he would hold a grudge too. Like one time someone came over to meet us, and she brought her husband with him, and they went over, and he sat on her bed, on his bed, Mika's bed,
Uh-huh.
right? And and he kind of looked at him funny, like you're not supposed to be here. This is my bed.
Gustaki.
This, this is where I sleep, okay? Only I'm
The
allowed.
gall of the guy. The gall of the guy to sit on the dog's bed.
And as he was walking away, he went behind him and pinched him, and he looked straight at him like, I didn't do anything. He's like, the dog bit me, okay? And Mika was like, no, he didn't even say anything, to him.
Right.
So no expression, nothing, but at the same time, he let him know, don't do that again. Okay. So multiple things like that with him. But
Yes.
he was extremely smart. He never wore drive on his, like, he never felt like he was the driviest dog. He was so stable. Yet,
Sure.
I don't know if I shared this, with you or not, but I think our video is getting long, but, I'll share this and then maybe we'll try to make it short. So,
All the good stuff is in the end, so they have to watch the whole thing.
one time I was working and he kept on bugging me, and the way he would bug me is like if I had two hands on the desk, he would put his nose under the arm and lift it up. Okay. This is like you're not paying attention to me. Okay. Or
Right.
he would put his nose on the outside of your hand. Okay.
Right.
So to let you know that, hey, in his wet nose, you always felt it that he was like, come on. And he would sometimes push his nose into your hand and make you
Right.
do something.
Uh-huh.
So he brought a ball over, and I'm like, Mika, not right now. I'm working. Okay. So,
Right.
and he did it two, three times. I took the ball and put it in the top drawer, okay, of my desk. He went away, sat down, like 10, 15 minutes later, Bunty came over. He went over to the door, and as she was walking in, he would touch the outside of her hand, right?
Right.
And it's as if he was trying to tell her something, right?
Sure.
And and then she says, "What do you want me to do?" And he would take two or three steps ahead of her and
Right.
expected her to follow him. And then she would
Yes.
come over, and then he would look at her and walk another two, three steps, like he knew the whole thing, how
Right.
to communicate with people. Okay.
Yes.
And then she followed him and he comes over. And I don't even know what he was doing at that time. I'm just sitting on my desk doing my thing. And
Right.
he comes over and he puts his nose on top of the desk right above the drawer, right?
Right.
And she's like, "What do you want?" Okay. Like when his whole muzzle, he rested the muzzle. Then he took his nose and he pushed against the drawer, right? And
Right.
she said, "What's in it? What do you want me to do?" And she opened up the drawer, he picked up the ball and walked away. Okay. So for me, when you talk about the dog has drive or the dog doesn't
Yes.
have drive, right?
Yes.
This is drive to me.
Right.
He knew he wanted something. He didn't jump up and down. He didn't bark. He found a
Right.
way to satisfy his drive. Okay. And
He manipulated his environment to
why
satisfy his drive.
he worked hard. He showed he can put two and two together,
Intellect.
you know,
He showed intellect.
intellect.
Yeah.
Yeah. To get the desired results. Okay.
Right.
And this to me was the shepherd breed.
Yeah. So, what would be the final takeaway in closing that you want people to go away with this conversation, to take from this conversation?
Drive, sometimes what seems to be drive is the conditioned behavior, nothing more than
Sure.
that.
Sure.
Okay. I mean, my friend Hilmar Schmidt came over to our house one time, right?
Yeah.
And he's the one who was the breeder of Arik, right?
Yeah.
And at that time we had Chief and we had Kasha and
Yeah.
we had another dog. I don't remember which one, right? And we had a deck with the railing all around it, but the
Yeah.
deck also had wooden beam on top, right?
Right.
So Hilmar took the ball and he threw it, you know, standing at at the deck, into the grass. And Chief and the other dog went around the railing, whereas Kasha just jumped over the railing to pick up the
Yeah.
ball. Okay.
Yeah.
And then he took the ball from her and he put it on top of the beam.
Uh-huh.
Okay. The other dogs went, you know, for a few seconds looking for the ball,
Yeah.
but Kasha knew where the ball was, and
Right.
she stood there and kept on looking at the ball for the longest time, like, okay. And and
Right.
and that's like his way of giving me the demo of what the drive is.
Right.
Okay. Is drive is not, it has to be sustained. You know,
Yes.
people who get masters, PhDs, doctorates, all that stuff, right? They are not showing you the drive to learn, in one
Yeah.
session or two sessions.
Right.
It's a lifelong thing, and this
Commitment. Yeah.
is what they're born with.
Yes.
And
The endurance to sustain that activity.
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why drive is so misunderstood, because people think that, because in our sport, in everything else, it's like when you see a dog go around six blinds with a purpose,
Yeah.
okay?
As
And
opposed to as fast as possible.
yes, yeah, and maintains the same thought. If you see a dog do 1,000 pace track without any food, okay,
Yeah.
with the purpose of finding the articles, okay,
Yeah.
that is the drive.
Hmm.
You know, it's not something when you see a dog hold the ball and bark for it 100 times, blah blah blah. That is not
Those are all conditioned exercises.
exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, so I have to go home. It's almost 7:40 Friday, but it's a good thing that we had a chance to discuss these things. Hopefully
Yeah.
one day,
Lovely as always, sir.
yeah, someone will watch this and learn something from it. Yeah.
All right. Thanks very
Okay, Abhay.
much.
Thank you.
Take care.
You too. Bye bye.